Welcome to the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. I'm Beatrice Chestnut.
And I'm Uranio, Paes.
And today we are talking with a special guest. We're talking with Christy Kennedy, who has had both a very interesting personal Enneagram journey and also does some really fascinating work integrating the Enneagram in her work with teams and using story and storytelling. So we're going to hear a little bit about both today, and we're really grateful and pleased to have you with us here today, Christy.
Yeah, welcome to the Enneagram 2.0, Christy. Thank you for your time and for sharing your expertise.
Oh, it's great to be with you both. What an honor.
Yeah. We go way back, and I don't see you often enough these days, so it's really, really nice to have you on our podcast.
Oh, likewise.
So why don't we start by, we'd love to hear a little bit about you and how did you first encounter the Enneagram and find your type? Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like and how you see your type playing out in your life, at a high level, maybe to start with?
Sure. It's a great place to start since that's what brings us here together is this fascinating framework, right? Yes. So I learned about the Enneagram. It was either in 1999 or 2000. But I was at the Doubletree Hotel in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I was listening to Helen Palmer speak. And I found it fascinating and was exploring these 9 styles and found that I deeply resonated with one of the styles, the type 7. And, my journey with the Enneagram, I would say, became a bit textbook for many years. I found great resonance in the Enneagram style of the Type 7 and played that out for many years, finding so much resonance in that Type 7 that I was utilizing it as a typing personality system. And so I have to jump forward a little bit to my personal career because I was a qualitative researcher. And I spent many years training corporate teams on uh, empathy for the intent of going into spaces with consumers and asking questions that would unearth insights and lead to new product and marketing ideas. And so during that time, I had learned the Enneagram and I found it really fascinating to not only explore a little bit more about myself, but also my clients and the people that I was coming in contact with.
Right. And so were you using it in a formal way then, or just sort of in your mind to make sense of things?
It was a bit more formal and a way to make sense of things. I found that I often liken it to my life as a journey up a mountain, and finding my type was like base camp. It was like I got to a point on the journey where I was able to see from this great outlook space, but I knew I couldn't stay there. Right? But I wasn't quite sure really where to go with it. So I played around with it for a while, for many years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from that
Mm-hmm.
space, from that lookout space and base camp.
Interesting.
It's interesting how sevens are at the same time head types that plan ahead and have ideas before doing, but they also go ahead testing things to have the experience of stuff. So a bit different from a head type 5 like me that could remain like years and years and years just thinking about things in my own head
Or
without
reading
doing.
books, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, you got it. It was a bit like an Enneamania is what I will often refer to it as, right? Like seeing where it was fun. It was fun to understand about these different aspects of type. Um, yes, and then as you might imagine, life happens, right?
Mhm.
So I was spending time as a qualitative researcher. I was traveling around the world working with some of the largest brands in this space, helping my clients understand their consumer, doing a lot of voice of the consumer work, right? And
Mhm.
I, in 2014, had this personal tsunami experience where
Mhm.
I was diagnosed with an aggressive cancer, an
Mhm.
autoimmune disease, really formally on the same day,
Wow.
Mhm.
and also went through a divorce halfway through my chemo treatments.
Wow.
Wow.
That's what the Enneagram calls a shock point.
You got it, Uranio. I had my shock point. And it was going through that experience that, there were so many insights, so many powerful moments. Going through chemo surgeries, the autoimmune diagnosis, the divorce, all at one time, and almost not surviving it. I mean, having a moment where I was packed in ice in a hospital room by myself, not sure if I was going to survive. Uh, and as you might imagine, that shifts things immensely. Uh, and I ended up, um, luckily, I guess, spoiler alert, but surviving that experience and coming out of it with a completely different perspective on life. It was more important than ever for me to do meaningful work. And while I loved my job as a qualitative researcher and doing voice of the consumer work, I shifted focus and did more of voice of the team work. And I started this company, Culture Conscious, and I started that in 2017.
Mm.
Wow.
Mhm. So doing team voice work, how would you describe that?
Yes. Well, I had loved the Enneagram and recognized, especially through that experience with cancer, that I had been living my life really through my head center. Um, I would say that I didn't even know oftentimes that I had a body, or if I did, I thought that it could be mind over matter and how I moved through the world. For instance, if I had been sick, I might say, oh, well, let me push through, let me push harder, right? And my heart, my goodness, that's a whole nother story. But my experience with the cancer really opened me up to these three centers of intelligence, which is a powerful point of the Enneagram that I think doesn't get talked about enough. And many of the books that we read about or we hear, we might get a page to these centers of intelligence. I really found it so transformative and powerful in how I moved through the world, recognizing that, oh my goodness, I do have this body, it's trying to speak to me, and I have this heart that is trying to connect. And what I realized is that these three centers were speaking three completely different languages, right? And I had this this invitation, per se, to actually pay close attention to these three centers of intelligence. And like I said, it's like my head speaking German, my heart is speaking Italian, and my gut was speaking Japanese. It was in a language I didn't even recognize. And having this opportunity to pull those three together in a powerful way, I actually refer to them as my internal board of directors.
That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're totally
I love
speaking
it.
our language right now because
Yeah.
we hold the flag a lot of times for how people don't talk about the centers of intelligence enough in the Enneagram world and how powerful that level of the system is right
Yeah.
there.
And
And
not only they don't talk much, but when they do, it's more about like, oh, Christy is a head type, so she's like this. Instead of saying, well, the point of talking about this is Christy can start looking at the two more neglected centers, because she wants to be a more whole human being, a three-centered being. Gurdjieff used to say that someone who uses only one or two out of the three centers is yet in a subhuman state.
You got it. Our friend Russ Hudson has this really fun quote about, he says, why be a third of a person?
Exactly,
Yes,
yes.
exactly.
And I love that, and think that there's a lot of power in that. So yes, it created a culture conscious in which, and also which we've trademarked, what we call three-centered leadership, which
Ah.
is
Ah, I
an
love it.
invitation to leaders to recognize which one of these centers is more of their guiding force, which might be more reactive, which is more forward, right? And how
Mhm.
do we also come to the table and fully listen to all three of our centers of intelligence in our board
Mhm.
meetings, internal board
Mhm.
meetings, and
Right.
yes, feel more whole.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So I want to ask about a couple of things that you've mentioned so far. One is I'm really interested because you were talking about how in the early part of your career, you were doing qualitative research focused on empathy, which is interesting, which is sort of more of a heart center function. When you look back, having, it sounds like you really got in touch with your other two centers after the whole cancer experience. How do you look back at how you were doing empathy before, early on? Were you coming from your heart center a certain way, or were you sort of thinking about empathy?
Oh, great question. Yeah, part of why we're here is even to talk about stories. So maybe I'll share with you a little story that I think will
Perfect.
illustrate that. I remember sitting on my back deck in Tucson, Arizona, which is where I was living during the time. I live in Seattle now, but was in Tucson, and I had finished my chemo. I was sick. I was bald. I had just had a bilateral mastectomy and reconstruct and part of my reconstruction. And I was sitting there and realized that I just had this moment, this powerful moment where I realized the tumor was gone at this point after the chemo and the surgeries. And I realized, oh my goodness, I have this open channel, this open path between my head and my heart. The tumor had been between my head and my heart. So this is,
Wow.
and it wasn't that it was impacting, the physical part of my heart, but it was in the path. And
Mm,
now all of a sudden it was gone. And I realized I had this free open channel between my head, my heart, and my gut. And so empathy before cancer, I would say, was really through, as much as I would say, my head.
yeah,
I could feel things. In fact, I remember watching a movie when I was 12 years old. It was the movie Beaches, if you've ever seen that movie.
I do remember that movie.
Crying and being like,
Yeah.
what's happening to me? Why am I crying? Right? This is one of my first experience with mirror neurons. If you know, like mirror neurons, if I see a spider crawling up your arm, Uranio, and I jump, it's like my brain can't decipher immediately if this is happening to you or happening to me,
Mhm.
Mhm.
right? So it was, I would feel emotion, I would experience it. I think I appeared as somebody who was empathic, but to really feel my heart. This is why I will say that cancer was one of the biggest gifts I could have ever been given.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, Christy, maybe you and I can teach the heart type B chestnut here. What happens with in empathy for head types like you and me? It's like Beatrice. It's like the other person is just the carrier of ideas, right? So we look at the ideas, not the person, and we look at eventually their needs, but the needs in themselves and not the person having needs. That's
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
risk. Would you
Mhm.
agree with this, Christy? Yeah. Mm.
Right. And you can think about, like, in the qualitative research you were doing, you can think about like ways of connecting with the customer that are sort of the head's way of thinking about how that's a good thing, and how that can, but I think feeling it, deeply, which it sounds like the gift of the cancer experience. And when I hear you say that, I really want to tell people, knowing you as I do, that that's not just some seven looking at the bright side, that you really lived through this really incredibly difficult passage with so much courage, and you really, let it change you in some ways for the positive. It wasn't just like you were kind of looking at the positive upside of it the way some sevens do. I think that's something that I so admire about you, is the way you went through something unimaginably difficult.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit more about that, about sort of maybe how you as a seven may have experienced that in a way that maybe people of other types might have experienced it differently, or would have had a different transformative experience?
Yes, thank you for the question. What comes up for me is my style. I do believe to help me survive that experience. I think about our Enneagram styles being another way of saying our egoic structures, and our egoic structures are there to help us survive. The challenge comes in when we let them run the show. And so, I remember laying on my couch, and my amazing parents came from Cincinnati to stay with me to help me through that year. And that seven part of me, I wanted, I enjoyed having chemo parties. I enjoyed, having people in the house. The fun, the joy, hearing the laughter. Sometimes I couldn't open my eyes or get up off the couch, but they were there, and I felt that. And having that sense of a fun, of experiencing moments of happiness helped me survive in that. But it also, I realized, was a one lens. It was one part, and this was the opportunity to open up to more of the fullness of who I was. So um, I remember sitting at my vanity one afternoon, and I had this amazing, powerful moment that I actually remember talking to with another friend of ours, David Daniels, before he passed. But I was sitting at my vanity, and it was almost as if I felt like I was seeing my soul for the first time. And I started to weep. And in that moment, I made a promise to myself. I made a promise to myself that I would treat myself like I would a best friend. Because up until that point, it was, I, all I can say is that life was just very different. It was, uh, yes, it was just another one of these beautiful moments of connecting my centers.
Mm.
Beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes we say that sevens can be more self-critical than it looks like they are from the outside. And so I think that's a profound thing, to be able to say, I'm going to really kind of love and appreciate myself,
Yeah.
even for having the fortitude to go through all that you went through and maintain your positive outlook. And I like how you say that that's both, that our egos are built for survival, and there are really positive aspects that we do need at times of extreme challenge, and at the same time allowing those times of extreme challenge to open us up to, as you say, more of the fullness of who you are, of all three centers of the depth of your heart, of parts of yourself probably that you hadn't been giving yourself credit for, having in the fullness that you did.
Ah, yes, absolutely. I see the seven part of me as like, this egoic structure. It's usually what leads. It's like, if I imagine my type 7 personality, and sitting at the table with my internal board of directors, it's like the five-star general in the army, right? It's plowing through, it's trying to help me survive. It's, you know, stoic, and not often does it really let its guard down. It's looking for how, with maybe some a lot of times guns drawn, right? Uh, and plowing through, but it's hopefully, you know, my inner board of directors are engaging more often now and developing the sense of trust and able to communicate with one another that they know they've got each other's back.
Yeah, it
Beautiful.
also sounds like you came back inside. And, sevens, when they go to the world of possibilities, they are going out there somewhere and not inside here. And also the arrows for sevens as resources for growth. We say that the first arrow is arrow to five, which is really come back inside, right? And so it sounds like that happened with you somehow.
Yeah, going deeper inside yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll refer to those arrow lines as my runway points. I
Mm.
spend a lot of time on airplanes. Yeah.
Yes.
And so, thinking about these analogies with airplanes, like, the fuselage is my type 7, but these runway points, they give me this deeper access to these other aspects of myself. And you're absolutely right. The five, thank you, Uranio, for this gift that you bring, and the other fives that are
Mhm.
listening, that really connect us deeper. I can stay focused. I can deeply understand something. I can stay with something through to completion. Sure. I lead with the sexual 7. Yep. Yeah, I've got, I have my bookshelf right here. I've got one of your books here, B, The Complete Enneagram. And remember reading that and being like, whoa, that was pretty powerful. Yes, pretty powerful insight. I do see the world through rose colored glasses. I tend to feel the intensity of things. I see this play out. I've lived in multiple places. I've got that kind of double whammy of the 7 and the sexual instinct. So it certainly shows up, and I also feel the repressedness, of the social instinct, and the self-preservation instinct. And I have this really interesting relationship. That yes, I certainly see it, and it's a great teacher.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Before we move on from the subtype thing and
Yeah.
therefore also the instincts thing,
Yeah.
I'll make a comment, and I don't know if it was your case, Christy. From a somatic perspective, we see that the social instinct implies a contraction in all the cervical ring and the upper chest and the jaws and the shoulders. And you said that somehow your cancer was in between head and heart, which somehow has to do with the social instinct in our approach. And it sounds like you had uh, um, an unrepression of the social instinct, perhaps even working with teens now, and going for a more comprehensive transformation. And you've just said that you are a social repressed person, as in our terminology here. I want just wondering if this was the case or not for you.
Oh, it's a great question, Ronnie. I'll have to sit with that even more. But yes, I think often about, we've lived in Seattle for a year and a half, right? Uh, I, as I mentioned, I travel a lot. But one thing I've realized, my partner, Robert, and I talk about often that we haven't engaged in community here the way that we want to. We have a very clear intention of doing that, and we had a conversation again this morning on our walk about, wow, we haven't done that like what we'd like to. And we were having a conversation about, because we're both socially repressed. He's a self-preservation 7, by the way. And we have a lot of fun over here, and do lots of fun travel. But yeah, it is something for both of us that we have to be really intentional about.
Yeah, but it sounds like it's coming up for you as true life opportunities. So maybe there was both centers of intelligent realignment and an instincts realignment happening.
Absolutely. And Uranio, I'm exploring this more. There's this the throat, like it's about like speaking my voice too. The an aspect that has it just can get stuck. Thank you for bringing that up.
Makes sense. And it sounds like it's good that you and your partner are having that idea, right? Sometimes, part of what happens is it doesn't even occur to you like, oh, we could be reaching out more, or maybe we should create more of a sense of community around us. So it sounds like that's a positive movement that's happening right now for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you work with teams, which is also social. Is this something different from before?
Well, in a different capacity, right? Because before it was more doing voice of the consumer work. Now I've shifted to voice of the team, and I'm fascinated. So it's this interesting thing to hold of seeing aspects where I have this opportunity to engage more in the social instinct, and also having this platform and this space to engage with team, which I love. Because while my team is comprised of 6 consultants, they are all individual coaches, right? I don't focus on one-on-one coaching. My focus is on team. And so I let them be able to engage more in that space when it's outside of the programs that we utilize. But
So this might be a good moment to pivot to talk a little bit about the work you do with the Enneagram, and I know you use story. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that and how you work with teams from that perspective.
yeah, so I utilize my qualitative research background and how they approach. So when we are working with corporate teams, we do have each person on the team, each leader, take an assessment, and the results actually will come to us first before coming to the individual. And then what we do is we have a qualitative session with them, which we call discovery session. And the reason we do that is because, I know there's some question from some people, or assessments or not. I'm a big believer in them. I think that it's a quantitative data point, and while it can be a great data point, sometimes algorithms can be flawed, or just even the way in which the person is taking an assessment. So having a person then engage in a meaningful qualitative discovery session where we're asking questions, not going in confirming what the quantitative data shows, but really exploring that through a sense of asking questions and having the person develop trust and speak story back to us, I believe is a powerful way for the concepts and the ideas of the Enneagram to resonate. Because then by the time we get around to sharing with people what they're going to find in their report, it's like we get to hold up a mirror. We're not trying just to say, okay, this is your type, because we never do that. It's more, okay, this is what the quantitative data is showing. And here qualitatively, yes, you've just shared with us who you are. This is, how is this resonating? And that way, we're going in before we've even done the workshops and the programs with a place where we believe that people are deeply resonating with their style.
So when you do the discovery session, are you saying that you do that without talking about type first at all, that you just sort of ask some questions and have a session? Or are you saying that you introduce the quantitative data of the type and then see if it resonates with them and discover things from there?
Yeah, so we do an overview of the Enneagram. In fact, we've done this with the team ahead of time. We'll do a short little overview about what the Enneagram is. But in
Mhm.
those discovery sessions, yeah, we'll say, okay, no, just as a reminder, this is what we're talking about today, and would love to ask you some questions before we get into what you're going to find in your report. So, being narrative trained, right? There's a way that we've done this, and but we will ask questions regarding some key elements of all of the 9 styles, and
Mhm.
then and hone in where we feel like we're seeing some energy or something to follow through with, before we then introduce what the quantitative data shows and what they're going to find in their report.
I see.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sounds like in this second phase of your career that you listen more to people. Like, from the team at least, you certainly listen a lot to the consumer. But something we see changing with sevens is instead of being too opinionated and talking about their own ideas, they allow for a process of other people developing ideas, and through listening more to them. I wonder if you saw this happening with you in your transition.
Absolutely. You know how, if I know you all have experienced this, I've experienced your workshops and I think they're fabulous. But when somebody knows that they're going to be asked a question, how instead of staying present in the group, it's more about what am I going to say, right? And what that can do is throw us off into being out of the moment. So, yes, the work requires this deep sense of listening and presence to be able to follow what's happening. And that's what we do then in the workshops. It's requiring story and a great deal of powerful listening.
Mm.
How do you use storytelling?
Yeah. So, um, after the discovery sessions with each of the leaders, then we have a workshop. And in the workshop, we're conceptually sharing about each of the 9 styles for sure. We have a beautiful way of bringing these to life in the workshops, but we give each person some pre-work of a few key questions to reflect on before the workshop, and then we ask that they be prepared to share in the workshop something about their style when we get around to describing their style. And the
Right.
reason we do this is because, and we tell the leaders this all the time, that they may or may not remember how we conceptually share the styles. What they won't forget are the stories of their colleagues.
Yes.
Mm. Yeah, that's really important. People don't forget stories, and that's
Yeah.
a beautiful way to really, it sounds like, both bring the Enneagram alive, but
Yeah.
help them get to know each other and remember something deeper about each other.
And to do like you do, be like seeing people, not just carriers of ideas.
Yes, yes. Well, yeah, yeah.
That's right. Yes, and it's Jerome Bruner, who is a cognitive psychologist, who had said that we're 22 times more likely to remember something when use of stories versus like other
Mhm.
types of data. Right?
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really powerful uh, way to think
yeah.
about how
It's
the power of story.
exactly. It's interesting because when I was thinking about your work and talking to you about story, I was also relating it to Uranio and I. One of the retreats we do, one of the inner work retreats we do, we call it the Experiential Enneagram. And that whole retreat is built around each person there telling an important story about themselves. And so, like on day one, we do some sort of theory. We talk about day one is the map, and we talk about a few different elements of the Enneagram system, and just to make sure everyone kind of has, we're all on the same page conceptually around sort of like the passion of the type and the subtype and the instincts, to make sure we're all really in tune with how central that is. And in some ways, in preparation for hearing in the stories some of the important elements that relate to the Enneagram. But then the next day is everyone tells a pivotal story from their life that really was something that shaped them. And it's incredible how powerful that day is. And we call it the experiential Enneagram because we're really experiencing it and not just training it or teaching it or learning from the head center. It's more of an experience of putting the Enneagram to the side for a moment and exploring each person's inner territory in terms of something that they, courageously share about themselves. And you're so right that, I remember people's stories, and it really helps you have incredible amount of respect for people, and this idea that we're all on our personal growth journey. And when we share about that, it both brings everyone together in this kind of way of like, we're all humans, we're all on this human journey, we're all both suffering, but also courageously overcoming our challenges together. And also how each type kind of deals with different kinds of challenges in their life, or how you can see the Enneagram type sort of, like you said before, kind of arising as a survival strategy, as something that's necessary at certain points in life, but also something that shouldn't run the show ultimately in the big picture. So I resonate deeply with you, but I want to make more space to hear more about how you do this in a team setting, which sounds really, really interesting. So, what else can you tell us about how that happens for you?
Yes. Well, first of all, sign me up for that workshop. That sounds great, and could deepen my understanding there. And as you were speaking, it was reminding me of another researcher, Dr. Yuri. I think it's Hassan from Princeton, and I hope I'm saying his name right. But he talks about neurocoupling and how when if we are deeply engaging and listening to someone telling a story, right, our brain actually synchronizes,
Wow.
and that there's this connection. Our brain patterns, like we have brain waves that we're actually sharing. How
Wow.
Interesting.
amazing is that, right?
Yeah, we start sort of resonating on the same vibration or on the same wavelength. That's beautiful.
Which is the higher level of empathy, right?
Yeah.
Yes, which is why this power of story is so impactful with teams. We watch teams uh, go from engaging with one another, seeing their behaviors on a day-to-day basis. But we're spending perhaps more time at work than ever before, even though it looks different on screens. And we see people's behaviors, and we can get triggered by them and frustrated by them, right? And we're seeing more and more dissension, and that we're getting further apart from people, and there's a lot of conflict. And so, but we watch what happens when we're bringing people back together. There's not, people aren't just reconnecting. They're rewiring their brain, and there's this sense of alignment that's happening when we see them get beneath the surface of just noticing what their colleagues' behaviors are, and seeing what who this person really is. You know, and you know, in our workshops we'll often talk too about how we are 2-year-olds trapped in adult bodies, right? And so when we start to hear these stories of people and bringing these styles to life, and I understand now not just the behavior but the motivation behind the behavior, yeah, I have a much deeper sense of empathy, right?
Beautiful. Yeah. Sometimes we say that in personality or in a, let's say, lower self, sevens are the storytellers. And they talk a lot about metaphors and so, but they are the ones sharing the
They
stories.
make a
They're,
lot of connections, and there's a lot to say about possibilities and future
yeah.
oriented
and it,
thinking.
and it's very engaging,
Yeah.
but it's them who are sharing stories and not truly listening to other people's. And it sounds like you're doing the opposite of that, which is allowing other people to share their own stories, which sounds brilliant.
In fact, it was a moderator tip when I was trained as a moderator and a qualitative researcher that I should be doing about 20% of the talking and 80% of the listening, right? So yes, we do the work that we need the most. So that's what I'm engaging in, hopefully. But yes, and that's exactly right. Like being able to have times where we're describing conceptually these styles, but then opening it up to the floor. We are not our team. We are not the stars of the show in these workshops, right? Yes, we can be a category expert, but creating the space for our clients and the team to be able to shine and deeply resonate. Our hope, our intention is that each person, has walks away with more compassion for themselves, more empathy for each other, and the ability to work more effectively and efficiently together.
And it sounds like you're doing that through creating a safe space, a supported space for people to share more deeply about who they really are and get to know each other. And like you say, almost like vibrate and align with each other in a deeper way than is often typical for, as you say, when we're just working together and seeing each other's behaviors and work styles. And that I love, and it sounds like you do that. And I know you, so I know that you do it with a lot of humility. And humility is, I just got through teaching my Dante's Divine Comedy in the Enneagram course in Florence. And one big theme of that whole thing is humility and how pride isn't just for twos. It's kind of what in some ways sort of keeps us attached to our egos and keeps it running the show, is this kind of pride of playing God a little bit or thinking we know it all or seeing ourselves as the center. And so, in what you're saying and how you operate, it really also sounds like there's a lot of humility there. Of it's not about the facilitator. It's not about what we're coming in and doing. It's about what we're allowing to emerge and to happen with these people as they tell their stories.
Yes, thank you. Creating the atmosphere for it to happen, right? Creating the environment.
The ingredients, like providing the ingredients and the support and the structure, but then letting them uh, allow what is there to unfold to happen.
Yeah.
So I have a question, and that is, I love the way that you talk about that you use story with teams. How do you integrate the Enneagram with the storytelling, if you do?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the Enneagram, first of all, we've just described a type, right? So we might describe the type two and then open this up to people in the room to share from their experience. What's a story that they can share that they feel comfortable sharing, that so how they resonate with a particular style, right?
So the story is about how they see their style playing out. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Ah, interesting.
Yes. And so, story about that, and then some of the other questions, and it opens it up, and then it opens up even conversations from other people say, "Oh, I see this in you. What was happening in this particular moment?" And so, through these lens of these three centers, what we're hoping to do is to give people the insight, the information as to when do they see that they're stuck in a story. Not only these powerful, beautiful stories, but also when are the stories that they're telling themselves true or not true, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think about
Yeah.
Byron Katie's work, right? About, if you're familiar with her in object relations and understanding about story. So these, when are we in this game of mental ping pong, which is when we're in our head center, and I see these two players of the ping pong game being, the future and the past, right?
Yeah.
So our
Yeah.
when we're in our brains fully, just and not engaging our heart, which is where story can come through powerfully. We're telling ourselves stories of, oh, what does this mean for the future? Am I going to get fired? As to something that just happened on the team, and then I'm going to the past. Oh, was that thing that I said in the meeting, was that the wrong thing to say or the right thing to say? And so we're bouncing back and forth in this mental ping pong game. And what I find is that, when we can encourage people to just take a breath, to pause, to be present with what is happening fully right now, to pause the game of ping pong and invite in the other centers, that can be powerful. The gut center gives us what I refer to as gut quakes. There's this I think it was Suzanne Zercher that talked about our gut center as being like a human seismograph. When we're measuring the intensity of the earthquakes around us, are in
Mm-hmm.
us, right? uh,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and also connecting with our heart, no matter what center that we lead from. There's uh, an invitation for, how do we strengthen these centers? How do we strengthen and have perhaps like coaches for each of these centers of intelligence?
Right. Sounds really good. Like also without getting stuck in the stories I tell, but also what I can do differently going forward. And I think the way that you describe it in your core ideas, Christy, is to move from intellectual understanding to embodied behavioral shifts. I think I read this in your description.
Absolutely, behavioral shifts, and also being able to call out, speaking of the heart, the emotions that we're experiencing. We talked a little bit about empathy before too, and how head types approach the heart and empathy. And I feel like I needed some emotional literacy. I needed to be able to understand what emotion it was that I was experiencing. And so I found it helpful for me to actually
Yeah.
look at like Plutchik's wheel of emotion, or
Mhm.
a list of emotive words on a page, like, and almost like I'm going into a dressing room and trying on the different emotions and seeing which one of these really does fit this moment. What is it that I'm embodying? Because I just don't, I feel like we have an opportunity to explore and really just be able to know what emotion it is that we're feeling.
Mhm. Yeah, so good.
Yeah, and I
Um,
love your emphasis again and again on the centers. I find that I do the exact same thing when I work with teams, that I spend more time on the centers than we might do in a typical Enneagram workshop, because there's so much there in terms of like helping people see, like you said before, how when you come from a different center as your main center, it is like you speak a different language. And Uranio and I have talked a lot about this in terms of like him as a head type and me as a heart type, and the way we can sort of miss each other, or like sometimes he has to educate me, like, look, I'm a head type. This is how I operate. I'm like, oh, I forgot again, because I operate so much from a different space. So I love how you bring that, you weave that in different ways. And I also want to highlight what you said about, on the one hand, sharing stories to help people understand who we are at a deeper level, what motivates us, and how we experience our type structuring our experience. But I also heard what you were saying in terms of helping people see how they may be getting stuck in an old story, that doesn't really describe reality very well because it's based on maybe an old mode of defense or a too narrow perspective that comes from our type that thinks it's seeing all of reality, but it's just telling us a story that isn't really true or that is limiting. And it's almost like that concept of story also helps in that way too. When do you need to reauthor the story? When do you need to see that you're stuck in an old story that isn't allowing you to flourish and to grow and to become a big part of a bigger story that you can create yourself, because it's you're the one who gets to tell the story and determine what the story ends up being.
You got it. I've done debriefs with teams on a meeting, and I have as many different perspectives of what just happened in that meeting as I have people in the room.
Oh, I love that.
It's
That's great.
fascinating, right? People can be like, "Well, let's go. I'm charged. I'm excited," and someone else thinks this is going to be the end of our team, or and everything in between. And it's another reminder that our inner worlds are so powerful in how we project into the outer world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I work with teams, I also focus on how much of each intelligence is represented in that team
Yeah.
in their Enya type mix, as I call
Yes.
it.
Yes. I recently worked with a team of about, I think there were about 12 people on the team. This was a leadership team of an organization, and there were no heart types. And it was such an interesting discussion we had about how you guys have no heart types on your team and what does that mean, and what how do you experience yourself given this, and how can each of you stretch in ways that make up for that gap in creative ways that you may not have realized you needed to.
Isn't that interesting? Yes, my last team had one heart type and all the rest, right?
Yeah, that can be a hard road for that person. Especially depending on what the team does and what their focus is.
Right. And important to reiterate for that individual, that, oh, they had, they had an important role to play on the team. I'm sure with the teams that you engage with, even though they didn't have heart types, they had the access. Hopefully, they had some access point on those runway points or a wing of how do they step in and embody that. Because even though I lead with the type 7, there has not been a moment in that I haven't, in the 25 years that I've known the Enneagram, that I haven't felt like there's a powerful lesson that's trying to be communicated with me from one of the other 8 styles.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a big part of growth generally with the Enneagram transformation is using, as you call them, the runways, the pathways of growth that are provided by the wings and the arrow line connected points, and making that more of a thing that teams do of helping people develop by strengthening those connections in positive intentional ways, so the 8, for instance, on the team with no heart types can play the role of the 2 sometimes, by using that arrow connected point, and that can sometimes be an incredibly powerful thing for teams to do. I'm also remembering another example I just want to share of a team I worked with, a leadership team of a tech company, and it was like a team of 14 people, and 7 of the people in the team were 7s, and it was incredible. And there was one 6. And the 6 actually came out on the assessment as a 7. So it was so funny because I think he was trying to fit in and hide. And he was very skeptical of the whole Enneagram thing. But by the end of the day-long workshop we did on the Enneagram, like that guy was the big winner, because all the 7s who had been bothered by him, like his poking holes in things and bringing up problems and slowing them down, they all realized how much they needed that guy, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And it was so interesting. And so he sort of unmasked himself more as a 6, a little bit reluctantly at first, but eventually at the end of the day, realizing people having a new appreciation for, oh, we need to slow down. We need to not just have all these exciting ideas and start running off to do them. We need to slow down. We need to ask this guy, okay, now that we've had all the ideas out there, what do you think is things we need to be aware of, or even a little bit cautious about, so there's so many things to do with teams when these things come out. And I can imagine that use of story that you integrate is such a beautiful part of getting everyone almost on the same team, in a very real practical sense.
You got it. You got it. I love that story. It's reminding me of a team that I was working with not too long ago, where the CEO was a seven, and he had one of his key leadership people as a type six, and they, just like you said, they were at odds. It's like, why
Mm.
is this person raining on my parade? I'm coming up with
Yes.
great ideas. And it wasn't until we did this work that they realized and had such a deep appreciation for one another. The seven realized he exactly, in order for his ideas to come to fruition in life, he had to have the type six, just as you were mentioning. What a beautiful way. And that wouldn't have happened without the power of story, right?
Yes. Yes. And then the six learns from the seven, while I'm out there, like kind of being attuned to problems and threats, I can also be attuned to opportunities and the positive data, in a way. And I think I've worked with people exactly like that, partners who are 7 and 6. And I think this is just, of course, one example of many of the ways that the Enneagram and helps people work together, especially if they can tell their stories like you do, in the way you do.
Christy, tell us a little bit about your Teams Under Stress tool.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, we have a new tool that I'll share the link with you all, that leaders, teams, individuals, anyone who's part of a team can go to. And there's a short little quiz that asks people, the parts of a team, um, questions that will help them recognize what center of intelligence that they may lead with, right? And we know that it's really hard to do that without the understanding of the 9 types. I think that the Enneagram is a really powerful way of helping us understand which of center of intelligence we lead with. But what it does is it can also facilitate a conversation that leaders can have with teams, with their teams, as to
Mhm.
how they're approaching situations similarly or differently, and where the
Mhm.
opportunities lie for them to engage all 3 centers and in stressful times. Because I'm seeing this happen with all of the teams that I'm working with. Each of my clients, they're experiencing so many new challenges, right? And it's stressful.
Yes,
So it's there's power in getting them closer to understanding which center of intelligence they lead with, but also the understanding of the other 2 centers, and it gives them prompts for the conversation that they can have with their teams.
awesome.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you for being with us, Christy. It's been a total pleasure as usual. Any last thing you want to say, or any way that people can find you if they're interested in learning more about your work?
Sure. Yes. You can visit us at cultureconscious.com, which is the name of my company, or also connect with me via LinkedIn. You can find us at Culture Conscious, or just even more under my name, Christy Kennedy.
Beautiful. And we'll put that in the show notes as well. So thank you so much for being with us and sharing your journey and your work. It's always great to see you, and even better to share you with our audience.
Oh, pleasure is all mine. How much fun to be together. I think the last time we were together, all 3 of us, was actually pre COVID. I can't believe that. Let's get together again.
Arizona. Yes, that's
Yes.
right.
All right.
Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, Christy.
Thank you.
And thank you, listeners and viewers. That does it for today's episode. We hope you will join us again next time for the Enneagram 2.0 podcast, where we talk about all things Enneagram.